All right. Hello everyone. Let me know if you can hear and see, especially you, Rachel. Are we good on Facebook? Are we good on YouTube? In the meantime, I'd love to see who's with us, so you can write in the chat where you're from, your name, if it's not your username. Great, I can already see feedback. Sound is good. Thanks, Kevin, Jetsi, Patricia, Julie. Awesome. So it's going to be an interesting session today. Before we start, I'll kind of let you in on the secret that I wasn't sure how to approach this session, Is it science? Is it mysticism? How can we prove it? Should we prove it? I'll tell you about it in a few minutes. Let's just see that everything's working well. Let me just get the okay on Facebook. All right, I got the okay on Facebook. Let's see that we're all set up. Are we set up? And ready to go. All right. Seems like we are. So, welcome to this week's Kabbalah Explained Simply. I'm Gil Shir, and today we're going to try and bridge the gap between the method of Kabbalah as a spiritual, mystical method, or as a science. So you've probably heard that Kabbalah is called Jewish mysticism, and I'm sure you've also probably heard from our channel, I assume, that Kabbalah is a science. And you might be wondering, is it this, is it that? Well, you're not going to get an answer to that today. And I started saying beforehand that when I was preparing for this topic, I was wondering what direction to take it in. Should we make it into a kind of proving Kabbalah is a science session? And I decided, what for? What's the point of doing that? I think it'll be a lot more beneficial if we can go a little bit into that scrutiny, think about those things, about mysticism, science, etc. But more importantly, to see what Kabbalah can do for you and how you can decide if it's valid enough as a method for you to give it an actual objective try. So let's jump right into it. So hi again, I'm Gil Shir. Today we're going to do in Kabbalah Explained Simply. We're going to try and bridge the gap between Kabbalah as a method of mysticism and or a method of science. Please just introduce yourself in the chat so we know where you're from and who's with us today. It'll be awesome to see all of you I know from probably all around the globe. So just say hi. And of course, any questions you have, don't worry. If they're a good question, sometimes I hear from students that they're ashamed to ask. Don't be ashamed. Ask anything. I promise I'm not going to make fun of anyone or anything. No good question or bad question. Just go for it, and let's try and make the most of this. So, interesting topic. Just to make sure we're on the same page, I'm going to start with some boring definitions. I mean, they're not really boring. It's just kind of a boring way to start to show the dictionary definition of something. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines mysticism as blah, 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 blah. But let's just do that anyway. Why? Because I just want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of definitions. Okay? So in fact, Merriam-Webster dictionary does define mystical the following way. Having a spiritual meaning or reality that is neither apparent to the senses nor obvious to the intelligence. That's an interesting definition. By the way, search Google for definition of mysticism. You'll find dozens, if not hundreds, of different definitions. And I looked through quite a few, and I think this is what I felt was closest. And both of these versions here, A and B. So B, involving or having the nature of an individual's direct, subjective communion with God or ultimate reality. And this is interesting because saying that it's subjective communion means that there must be some kind of objective communion, right? Because otherwise, if mystical is subjective, then if it's non-subjective, then maybe it's not mystical, maybe that's scientific. But let's just kind of get on the same page here. So this is more or less the definition of mystical. If you disagree with that, I'd love to hear that as well. How would you define mystical or mysticism, etc.? But let's keep going. So how does the Merriam-Webster define scientific method? I'm just laughing because it's kind of so cliche to bring the dictionary definition, but again, I just want to get everyone on the same page. So, scientific method, definition of the scientific method. Principles and procedures for the systematic pursuit of knowledge involving the recognition and formulation of a problem. Okay, so recognize and formulate the problem. Collect the data through observing and through experimenting, and the formulation and testing of hypotheses. Okay, so that's basically how the scientific definition is described. Now, the reason why I mentioned in the beginning that I'm not going to, in this session, prove to you that Kabbalah is a science, because, to be honest, I can't prove it. Just like any scientific method, especially today, is not really 100% valid. I mean, even like discoveries, I spoke to a friend of mine who's a physicist in Tel Aviv University, and I was kind of asking him, okay, how would you define a science? And is in your opinion, is Kabbalah scientific? He studies Kabbalah, and he's also a physicist. So it was really interesting to talk to him. And he said, look, today there's no certainty. Even like the Higgs, I'll show you an example of an article from the Scientific American, which to me, I mean, when he told me this, what I'm going to share with you now, it was really interesting to me, because you might have heard of the Higgs boson, which is a particle, and then the discovery of it, it's also called the godly particle, etc. So apparently, no one's ever seen the particle, and no one knows for sure that it exists. Only what do they know? They know to a 5 sigma probability that it does exist. So in other words, there's a high probability that this particle exists, high enough to say, okay, it probably exists, so we can say we've discovered something. And it's interesting to see even how it's described. It says here, in short, 5 sigma corresponds to a p-value or probability of 3 by 10 to the minus 7, which is 1 in about 3.5 million. And interestingly, this is not the probability that the Higgs boson does or doesn't exist. Rather, it's the probability that if the particle does not exist, the data that the CERN scientists collected in Geneva would be at least as extreme as what they observed. And then continues here, the reason that it's so annoying is that people want to hear declarative statements like the probability that there is a Higgs is 99.9%, but the real statement has an if in there. So, in other words, even the most advanced scientific experiments today, you can't really say that there's complete certainty of anything. It's all a question of probabilities, and in that way, then the whole definition of science as we defined it becomes questionable. And even more so than that, if you want to take it a step further even, and let's do that. So, Australian physics professor Andrew Truscott said the following. He said, measurement is everything. At the quantum level, reality does not exist if you're not looking at it. So, this is quite absurd, because if we go back to the definition of mysticism, Then it says, involving or having the nature of an individual's direct subjective communion with an ultimate reality. Let's put God aside, because God can be defined in all kinds of ways, but an ultimate reality, some form of reality which they define here as ultimate. But again, we go back to this, and then a physics professor whose expertise is quantum mechanics says, at the quantum level, reality doesn't exist if you're not looking at it. So if you're looking at it, it already becomes objective. In other words, everything that we observe, you could say on some level, is subjective, and therefore it's under the definition of mysticism. So because of that, the question or argument of is Kabbalah a science or not a science, in my opinion, becomes simply irrelevant. Why does it become irrelevant? Because, okay, let's say I take, Karl Popper's definitions of how to define a science, and actually another student of ours, Dr. Ephraim Eliav, had a long discussion, about an hour of a presentation of presenting according to Karl Popper's definition of science, why Kabbalah is a science. I'll actually link to that. I'll link to that talk. Maybe I'll even do that now. Let me just see if I can quickly find that link. Okay, I'll definitely put that link in. I'll put it in, and you can watch that, and that will give you an hour in detail of how, according to all of the criteria, Kabbalah can be a science. But again, the question is, so what? So okay, so we prove that it's a science. All right, what does that even mean? How does that affect me and what I can gain from it? And in my opinion, it doesn't really, and that's why I don't deem it as really that important. Now, what is important then? What can we learn about Kabbalah and understand in order to enable us to possibly make a choice? Make what choice? Of trying this method out. Or if you're already studying this method, then trying it out every day anew. And if you're already studying, then you know that this point of freedom of choosing to study every day is a point of freedom of choice. And it's actually a very distinct point of freedom of choice, and possibly even the only point of freedom. I'm not going to elaborate on that now, but just kind of a quick segue and then we'll go back. Everything else you choose in life is always a choice between one form of reception and another form of reception. And therefore, it is not actually a choice. It is simply a calculation. What is the calculation? The calculation is, where will I get the maximum benefit? And the outcome of that choice, of that calculation, is your choice. So it's not really a choice. Do you want to eat or do you want to drink? So you have this calculation inside that simply gives you the outcome of maximum benefit. And choosing to study Kabbalah is choosing something that is talking about a different level of fulfillment, and therefore it is, let's say, discovering a point of freedom. But we'll leave it at that, and I'll actually take a quick pause just to see if we do have any questions up until this point, or any comments as well. Not questions, but maybe comments. Okay. So I see all kinds of comments. Great. Keep commenting. Yeah, I can see already some links are being posted. That's not the link that I was referring to, but that's okay. I'll have that link up in full. Okay. So let's keep going a little bit further down the rabbit hole. So I want to show you a quick video that will help us take this discussion a little bit further. So this is actually, let me just open the video on YouTube. somewhere on YouTube. I know it is because I prepared it in advance, but I can't find it where I put it. Where did I put it? I just have like 15 windows open with the broadcast and the like, so I can't see it right now. Okay, here it is. All right, so here we are. Dr. Quantum visits Flatland. So this is from the channel What the Bleep on YouTube, and it's also from the movie series What the Bleep Do We Know. This is from the second movie, I think, How Far Down the Rabbit Hole, and let's take a look at it. Let's just go full screen, and we'll play it.
To Flatland, a world of only 2 dimensions. Only forwards and backwards, left and right. In this world, there is no up and no down.
I said to Ray, where's Dottie? He said, well, she's out in line.
What the bleep is that thing?
In this world, the 2-dimensional beings that live here have no concept of 3-dimensional objects. These 2-dimensional flatlanders have no understanding of cubes, spheres, tetrahedrons, or yours truly. From their 2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
What the planet is that?
Okay, I just want to pause here for a sec, and let's think about this. So let's say, here in this clip, they're showing us a 2D world and then how 3D interacts with it. So let's say that we're in this world. Well, not let's say we're in this world, and here we are. And in this world, we have all kinds of things happening, right? To us, to people we know, to countries we know. And let's say this is this world. And let's just make it, okay, that's better. So in this world, all kinds of things are happening. So, I don't know, there's a war going on, and something happened to me. Maybe I fell in love, and something happened to a friend of mine. They got promoted, or I got promoted, or my family member got promoted, and all kinds of things are happening. And these things, in most cases, they don't seem connected, right? They seem random. And these are far examples, like war and love. A war in a country and me falling in love is obviously very distant. But even if you look at things that happen closer to you, right? Like something good happened to you, like you got some kind of promotion, or like I said, fell in love, or got married, or had a child, or achieved something you wanted to achieve. And then on the other hand, something that could be bad happens to you. And in that case, like maybe the opposite, you got fired, or you got divorced, or some illness, or God forbid, bad things. And it all seems random. It seems like there's no connection between one event and another event and another event. And it's just like in that clip that we're watching now, that what are they seeing? They're seeing like a circle that's growing. And it's random. It's completely random. And it's, you could make up a million explanations of what that circle is and how it was formed. A million. Just like you can make up a million explanations of how everything that happened to you could possibly be connected. And you'll be wrong. It's not that you might be wrong, you will definitely be wrong. Just like those people in Flatland who have no perception of a third dimension will not ever be able to guess something that there is another dimension that exists, that's outside of them, and that it's simply a finger being pressed from a three-dimensional world into a two-dimensional setting, right? So we're in a similar situation, you could say. Let's keep watching a little more.
Hello, little circle. Fear of the unknown. Or should I say, not yet known. It's a puzzle. If we see only what we know, how does anyone ever see anything new? The unknown. How do we ever get out of our box? Hello, little circle. Don't be afraid.
Who said that? Where are you?
This is always the tricky part to explain. I'm in another dimension, another space. I am above you.
Never use that word.
What word?
The A word.
Above?
It's forbidden.
Well, what do you think it means?
I don't know, and I don't want to know. You can be severely punished if you use that word. Are you a ghost?
I hope not. I just have a different perspective than you do. I can see things in a way you can't yet.
Oh yeah? Like what?
Well, okay, you have a safe hidden in your pantry. And inside it, you have 12 coins, a will, and a passport.
Okay, I want to pause here as well. This is a great example. So, again, we can go into a discussion now, for the 2D world, is what's happening now science, or is it mysticism? Is it in a subjective reality, an objective reality? And I'll say again that it doesn't really matter. Because what matters is, can that two-dimensional being actually rise to a three-dimensional setting? And then, by rising, understand everything and the forces, the causes of reality. Just like here, that three-dimensional being, that person, is looking and seeing everything that's in the safe, and the two-dimensional being cannot grasp space, right? So it cannot grasp, it can't grasp three-dimensional space, so it can't grasp how someone can see two areas at the same time by looking at it from above the A word, right? So the question is, the interesting question is, first of all, do you see that there is a method that can discover the forces that govern this reality? And how can you see it? How can you prove it? You can't prove it. And that two-dimensional being cannot prove that three-dimensional being is now doing something that's, beyond, that it's measurable, that it's, let's go back to the definition that we said before of science, that it can be observed and experimented and formulated and tested as hypotheses, etc. And it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that two-dimensional being is seeing that the three-dimensional being can explain reality. It makes sense. It's talking truth. The two-dimensional being can possibly even feel, and feeling something isn't necessarily non-scientific. It's above science, actually. And even Einstein said that when he talked about religion. Maybe we'll take a look at what Einstein said as well. So the question remains, not is it science or is it mysticism, but simply, how can I rise to this new dimension? And is Kabbalah a method that can in fact do that? Right? That would be the question, in my opinion.
How did you know that? What are you? Are you a god?
Well, no more than you. You see, since I am above you, in the third dimension, I can see inside things in your world.
Third dimension? You are a crazy ghost. There's only two. Look.
So, if I were to touch the inside of your stomach, how would I do that?
Well, you'd have to cut through my skin. Otherwise, it's impossible. Stop!
Ready for more?
More what?
Dimensions.
Oh.
Directions.
No. Yes, but there aren't any. More? What will happen to me? What will I become?
You'd have to become it to know.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, and that's probably the key part here. You have to become it to know it. Because otherwise, I can tell you it's scientific, and I can give you all the proof, or not, but it wouldn't make any difference to your life. The only thing that would make a difference is if you discover it for yourself, and then you realize if it's true for you or not. And I think most of the decisions we even make in life are according to that same logic. So let's say, you want to study something in university, let's say some kind of science, biology, whatever. And you're considering different universities to do that, right? So you're considering this university and this university, University A, University B, University C, University D. You have no knowledge or some knowledge in biology. So how are you going to know where should you study biology? You'll look at each university, you'll see the professors there, maybe you'll even listen to them a little bit. You probably won't understand much. You definitely won't understand all of the depth of their knowledge, because to do that, you would have to study biology for 20, 30 years in order to reach that level of really understanding everything they have to say. But all you can do is with your own senses, and all of them, you can weigh out all of the possibilities and measure everything that you can with your own vessel, with your own sensation, and based on that you can make a decision. And every decision, when you think of it, every decision you make in life follows the same logic. You gather all of the information that you can, you collect the data, whatever you have, and you assemble it in a certain way that at the end you reach some kind of decision. And the decision is always a probability. It's never complete, utter confidence in a certain action. And I think anyone that has some life experience can completely identify with that you can make plans and you can think, that your plan is bulletproof, but plans are one thing and reality is another thing. So just like anything in life, when you want to really know if something is practical and if it's for you, then you have to, first of all, examine it with everything you can, with all of your senses. And then at the end, the calculation ends up being some kind of emotional output. Is it right for me? Do I feel it's right? And this goes for all kinds of decisions that you make. How do you decide to marry someone? Right? It's a serious life-changing decision. And you decide it based on your emotion. Right? Do I love that person? Do I see myself connecting with them, raising a family with them, if that's what you want, etc., etc., etc. So I want to talk a little bit about some things in Kabbalah that could sound a little bit like mysticism, and that's okay, because as we said, according to the definition of mysticism, then all of science is mysticism, because everything is subjective. So I want to talk about the light that reforms. Some of you might have heard of that, others probably not. So what is the light that reforms? The light that reforms is something that sounds super mystical. It's basically, it goes like this. So we're here. Wait, sorry. My bad. Okay. We're here. And we're all of us now watching YouTube or Facebook or wherever you are. Even if you're not watching it live, it doesn't matter. So there's you and there's, let's see who. There's Renata, and there's Patricia, and Richard, and Daniel, and Claudia. So all of us are here watching it together now. Claudia, and we said Patricia, and Daniel, for example. And Kabbalah say that, and all of you, every single one of you that is watching now, Kabbalah say that if you, while you're watching this session, have an intention, just your thought, to connect, and through your connection to discover that new dimension like we saw in the flatland, that extra dimension, that hidden layer of reality, if you do that, then you activate a mechanism called the light that reforms. Light that reforms. And if that doesn't sound like mysticism, then what does, right? The light that reforms. And it sounds super mystical. But let me ask you a question. Let's say you go back in time, and you probably don't even have to go back in time. You can just travel to a place in the world that is not developed. And I actually experienced it myself when I was in India. I had a camera. It was before smartphones were really out. It was 2005 or something. And I had a digital camera, and we were traveling, can't remember exactly where, but North India, and we came to this place that was no tourism, and some of the kids there have never ever seen any technology at all. So they saw our digital camera, and they looked in the screen. They didn't understand what they were looking at even. And then we took a photo of them, and we showed them the photo, and they didn't understand the concept. They thought that there were people inside the phone, inside the device. They didn't imagine it was them. I don't think they've ever seen themselves even, because there's probably no mirrors there, and they were so dirty. They were really cute, but it was just, for them, it was complete magic. It was just, we were like wizards or witches or who knows what. But for us, obviously it wasn't. We understand. It's not that I can explain the mechanism of a digital camera. But I know that there is some kind of logical mechanism here that I can't necessarily explain, but someone can. A scientist maybe. And the scientist discovered the laws that work a certain way. And based on these laws, the engineers built certain devices, and that enables this to be a device that can take photos. So let me tell you that light that reforms is the exact same thing. There is a mechanism here that works according to a defined structure, a scientific blueprint of reality. And just to kind of get a picture of what this blueprint looks like, you might say, okay, show me a picture of this blueprint of reality. Then I can do that. Here is an example. It's just an example. Hold on, you guys see my screen? You see it? Yes. Okay, so this is an example of the world of Adam Kadmon, one of the worlds that Kabbalists, who are scientists, who discovered this layer of reality, they're the ones that were able to, similar to the video we watched about two-dimensional, three-dimensional, well, they're like the scientist that was able to be in the higher dimension. And from that higher dimension, they're not magicians, they're not mystics, they're not kind of voodoo, there's no magic there. They simply were able to discover, to develop this new sense that lifts them to a higher dimension. And from that higher dimension, they described their findings, and this is an example of a breakdown of a spiritual structure of the world of Adam Kadmon, how it breaks down to Galgalta, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Bon. These are names of spiritual states, and how each one of these states breaks down on different levels in Peh, Chazeh, Toch, and how all of these are calculations of the light entering and exiting, and all of these calculations are precise and they're measurable, and hundreds of Kabbalists who have reached and developed that same sense were able to replicate it, and they wrote about it in different forms and different angles. Just like in physics, we have different scientists writing about the same phenomena but from different angles. So they did the same here, and this explains how the mechanism of the reforming light works, that the light, briefly, the light that doesn't enter, that if you do not yet have a kli, meaning if you do not yet have the spiritual device, then the light that would enter the kli, it does not enter it, it surrounds it, and from its surrounding state, then it lifts the kli, the vessel, and it gradually prepares that vessel to develop that additional sense. Now, it's difficult to explain because imagine trying to explain, the color blue to someone that's never seen before. And I always give that example, and if you haven't heard it before, and even if you have, then try and imagine for a second how you would do that. How would you define, how would you explain, not define, explain, try and explain right now the color blue to someone that is blind from birth, never seen before any color at all. It's very, very difficult, and only if you open your eyes, then you'll be able to truly see. And that is the wisdom of Kabbalah. The wisdom of Kabbalah is a scientific method that has a lot of elements that seem like mysticism, like this is a great example, the light that reforms. But in fact, there is no mysticism in Kabbalah. There is only laws and logic that some of it, or most of it, is hidden from our senses. Just like the mechanism of the digital camera was hidden from the kids that I met in a remote village in India who had no idea what technology was, or what a camera is, or how they even look themselves. So just like for them, the camera is mysticism, it's magic, etc. So for people who have not developed a spiritual sense, then this method is also like mysticism. But now the question is, in order to benefit something from this method, do I need to already have that sense? And the answer is absolutely not. Because just like I don't know how the digital camera works exactly, but that doesn't prevent me from using it. I can still use it all the time, and I do. I don't know exactly how the phone works. I know more or less, but I don't know exactly. And I definitely can't build one myself. But I can still use the phone. And it's the same thing in the wisdom of Kabbalah. It doesn't matter if you call it science or if you call it mysticism. That's irrelevant. You can use these methods that Kabbalists explained, like the light that reforms, and there are many such more things that you can apply in your daily life. And these things will bring something into your life. What will they bring? Well, if you've tried it, then you can tell me. Because whatever I say is irrelevant. It's only relevant to what you discover. So, actually, this will be interesting to see. I want to throw this question at you guys in the chats. So, and only answer if you've been engaging with this method for, say, some time. Doesn't matter if it's a week or a year or 10 years. But if you've been engaging with this method in some time, even if you've not yet discovered the science behind it, even if you're just using it as a consumer, quote unquote, that knows there is some logic without even understanding the logic yet. So even if you're just at that level, I'd like to know what has this brought into your life by using it just as a user and not as a scientist yet. So I'd love to see what you guys have to say about it. And again, please only answer if you've had some experience with studying Kabbalah. I don't care if it's a week or if it's a year, but some experience. Let's see what else we have here in the meantime until you guys answer. Okay, so in the meantime, are the sentences of Kabbalah studied with the same level of accuracy as the statements of modern science? The answer is no doubt. I won't even say higher accuracy, because as we saw in modern science, there is only some level of probability. And that's what a discovery today is. It's a certain level of probability. So you're certain to an extent. You're not 100%. No one's seen these particles that they talk about, but they say there's a good chance that if they exist, or if the particle does not exist, then the data would be as extreme as it's been observed, or something like that. So in Kabbalah, it's not a probability, it's actually a complete certainty. And those illustrations that we saw before, just for fun, let's take a look at another one. Here's another one, a breakdown of the Galgalta Absag, broken down with 10 Sefirot. On the right side is Keter Chochma Bina, Chesed Gvura Tiferet, Netzach Hod Yesod Malchut, and it's the breakdown according to the structure of Chazet, Tabur, and how the different levels of coarseness that interact with the light can react to it and respond to it. And this is written by Baal HaSulam, Kabbalist Baal HaSulam, who elaborated on what the Ari wrote 500 years before that. So what the Ari discovered is the same as what Baal HaSulam discovered. And this has been like this for thousands of years. So Kabbalists who have revealed these forces of nature, they've revealed the same forces, and they were able to replicate it and find the same findings. The only difference is they were able to explain it in more detail. So maybe the details were added over time, which is similar to how modern science is today, by the way. Okay, let's see if we have some more questions, and if you guys have had a chance to answer my question, and I can see that you have. Okay, great. Kabbalah is revelation of a miracle. Awesome, Patricia. Seraphim says, the wisdom of Kabbalah has helped me complete my picture of the fullness of reality. Awesome. This is a broadened understanding of what I went through and brought me a path forward. This is Vold Som said that. Helen said peaceful life. Brian says new sensations. Pedro says I can feel more love and connection with other people and nature, the creator or force that connects and holds everything together. Beautiful. I'm going to read some more just because I enjoy it. But it's a beautiful example of people who are from, I'm guessing, from all around the world, and I'm guessing also from different religions, different ages, different genders, different backgrounds. And these answers, they give me even greater confidence that the question is Kabbalah science or is it mysticism, is irrelevant. It's just not a relevant question. It's a philosophical question. It could be interesting to discuss that, but the purpose of this session is not just to intrigue your interest, but it's to provide you with something that can truly help you bring light, I would say, into your life, to bring something good into your life, something that you can experience for yourself. It doesn't matter if you can measure it with a certain device. What matters is that you can do that. Not that someone can do that, that you can do that. B. Thompson wrote, Kabbalah has enlightened me, helped my understanding. Awesome. And Sandra wrote, I'm discovering all I do for my own benefit and what I do to change my intention and serve. Gilai says, it gives me a different perspective of the whole world and even myself. Awesome. Okay, there's more and more and more. I want to keep reading just because it's great just to see that, to see the spectrum of beautiful things that this is reality. This is your experience. Every single one of these comments here, that's your experience, and there's nothing more real than that. No science or mysticism can take away what you feel. Okay, let's see a little bit more. What else do we have here? Do we have some more questions? Okay. Okay, Yvonne, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but I'll read it. Why does it matter if it's mysticism or not? If it works, who cares how it's called? Exactly. I completely agree with you, Yvonne, and that's why there is something that is required, because I think what is important kind of to take away from here regarding the science or not science thing is that you understand that Kabbalah has richness in its detail. Those illustrations that I showed you before that have been replicated by different Kabbalists in different times, in different centuries. So, if you just think about it even logically, let's say you have no way to prove, without developing that sense yourself, you have no way to prove that what they discovered is in fact real. Only if you develop that sense yourself and you discover it for yourself, then you can say, okay, I found it. I saw it too, just like opening my eyes and seeing blue. Otherwise, I can just trust someone. But I think that the fact that there's so much detail here that's been repeated in different centuries by different people over and over again, and these aren't just like weirdo people. These are people that led communities, and that some were concealed Kabbalists that were hidden, in caves, but some were leaders and influencers who did a lot of good in their community and their countries, etc., and who had a huge positive impact on their surroundings. And these aren't a bunch of weirdos that just kind of made up mumbo jumbo, like some kind of stories, right? So even just thinking about it logically, you see that there is vast wisdom here and detail that, you can't make this up. That's my opinion, at least. And I encourage you to research this for yourself and to examine this for yourself and to find if Kabbalah can bring into your life what we just read here in the comments, all of those beautiful things that I think there's no greater thing than that. And I see that you guys are still writing, which is awesome. You can keep doing that. I think I'm definitely going to go over after the session and read all of the comments. But just before we kind of end, because we don't have a lot of time left, I do want to take a few more questions. Question from Torah Joe, who's asking, what blocks the light? What blocks the light? Great question. So we said that if we connect between us, we gave the example of Daniel, Claudia, and Patricia, and I said that Kabbalists have found that if Daniel, Claudia, and Patricia, and all of us, every single one of us, want to connect, and not just connect, to be similar to a system that is called Adam HaRishon, or you don't even have to know the name of it, just connect to be like the system of nature. Then by doing that, we're creating this force that influences us, we're connecting to that force. Now, what was the question again? So the question was, what blocks the light? Thank you, Ruth. What blocks the light? And the answer is simple. The only thing that blocks the light is my ego. So it's actually its natural state. Its natural state of the ego is blocking the light, is being like a closed door. So in order to attract the light, we need to consciously make efforts to remove the ego. Now, removing the ego is it's not so simple. It's 125 degrees of not removing, but of correcting the way the ego is used. But any thought for self-love, self-fulfillment blocks the light. Any thought of connection and of fulfillment towards the others, that opens up the channels for the light. Okay, let's see what else. Victor is saying, how can you scientifically explain that the ego is destroying the world? Wow. There's so much data on that, Victor. Not directly saying that ego is destroying the world, but that overconsumption is creating, problems, poverty, wars, etc. Environmental issues, global warming, overconsumption, waste. All of these things are obvious results of the ego. If we consume 10 times more than what we need, obviously we're producing huge amounts of waste that end up floating around in the ocean. So that's, destroying the balance of the wildlife there. And obviously if, one country wants to exploit the other country, I'm not talking about the wars that are happening right now, but even just look all around the world, how Western countries went into Africa to exploit their natural resources and the imbalance that creates. I mean, I think you can find it all across the board, that scientific evidence that ego, meaning the desire to benefit on the expense of others, there's no problem in benefiting and having pleasure. On the contrary, Kabbalah is a method that teaches how to receive infinite pleasure. The only problem is that it's being done on the expense of others, that my fulfillment is based on your suffering. And that's destroying the world. Okay, let's see, maybe one more question. Am I a member of the Illuminati? No, I'm not. Let's see what else. That was a question, but let's take maybe another one. Okay, Daniel, if you wrote it all uppercase, so I'm feeling this question is burning for you. Through the reforming light and surrounding light, I didn't explain the difference, but okay, depend on the readiness or of reception of the student. Of course, but also it works with no readiness of anything, of anyone, because we're immersed in this light regardless of our awareness, and not just us, meaning who are watching here, but in fact all of humanity are immersed in this light, and all of humanity are being influenced by it. The only question is on what level and to what extent. And there are some people, a lot of you are here now, and there are a lot of you, of those people who aren't here now, who have an awakening. And this awakening This awakening is beyond the question of mysticism versus science. Because some people came to study Kabbalah. I, for example, came from a very scientific approach. I came from an interest in studying physics and understanding how the world works, etc. And I know a lot of people come from more of a mystical kind of approach of mysticism and spirituality and etc. And how can we both, these two opposites, find the same answer? How can we both end up studying Kabbalah? And the answer is simple, because Kabbalah is above any of that. It's above the realm of this world. And those that have this point in them, that have been awakened, they really don't care if Kabbalah is a science or if it's mysticism. And in fact, they don't even care I'll say what they do care about and tell me if you agree. What they care about is that they're engaging in something that at its deepest level resonates as being true. And that sensation is more powerful than any intellect and any thought. It is something that feels like it just is so powerful, it just enters every cell in our body that we can't even explain it in words and we later on find rational explanations for it, for this feeling. But there really is no rational explanation that can explain how a Muslim and a Jew and a Christian and a 70-year-old and a 17-year-old and a guy and a girl and a non-defined person, we have that too today, and all kinds of people, and rich and poor and intellectual and non-intellectual, all of these people who have this desire awakened in them are finding truth. And really the purpose of this video, I would say this, and with this we'll conclude. I would say, if you feel that there is truth in this wisdom, in this method, then the only thing you can do is you can try it out. And actually, I even have 2 slides prepared on explaining how you can try it out. Let me just put them on the screen. So here is how you can try it out. You can try it out by joining KabU. A lot of our students here who are watching live are in KabU already, and in KabU you'll find by doing a membership to KabU, you'll get full and unlimited access to all of our KabU courses, to our learning path, which is 20 weeks of 4 semesters, and everything is available in MP3, MP4, and transcripts. You'll be able to join our weekly Zoom session, which is happening right now after this session. We're going to go with all the KabU students onto Zoom, open our cameras for those who want, and talk and ask questions and chill. It's awesome. I love it. How much does all this cost? Well, it doesn't cost $1,000. So why did I write $1,000 here? Simple. Go to any website that offers this value, the same amount of courses. Easily you pay $1,000. Go to any website that offers you a community like that with weekly live sessions with our best instructors who are answering not only in the live sessions but in the forums. You'd easily pay $200 a month for. So that's why I wrote $2,400 for a year. And obviously, not obviously, but we're not charging anything near that. KabU is part of a non-profit, so every dollar that goes in goes out. So we're not asking for $3,400, because our goal is to make this as widely accessible as possible, because eventually we want to make this wisdom available to anyone in the world that feels that this method can lift them to develop that sense to a higher level of reality. And that's why we're offering it for the very low price of $19 a month, or $119 a year, which is very, very little in my opinion for the value that you'll be getting here. And if you click the link, you get a 14-day free trial. You have no risk here at all. I personally guarantee that if you don't like it, you can cancel and you will not be charged even $1. We've built Kabbalah with the sole intention to bring everything you need to test this method for yourself, to discover it for yourself, to feel it for yourself. Because that is the only thing that matters. Not if it's a science or if it's mysticism, but how it can impact your life, how it can lift you to this higher perception of reality, to this higher level. So with that, on that note, we'll conclude and we'll continue with all the Kabbalah students to Zoom. And I'm Gil Shir, and today we bridged the gap between Kabbalah as a science and Kabbalah as mysticism. We found that the bridge is really by rising to discover everything Kabbalah has to offer. And hopefully you enjoyed the session. If you did, click the like button, share, subscribe, etc. And see you guys next time.